Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Maria Santis sat straight-backed, hands clasped behind her, eyes fixed on the center of the room where Colonel Hayes paced like a man who already knew the outcome. The other Marines at the table barely glanced her way, like she was invisible, like her perfect score on the firing range had never happened. But it had. She'd outshot every man in her class, shattered a base record that had held for 3 years, and instead of shaking her hand, they sent her here to stand silent while the colonel tore her application in half. "You're too aggressive, Santis," Hayes said, his voice carrying judgment like a gavel. "We need team players, not lone wolves who pick fights outside the armory." Maria's lip was split. Purple was blooming along her cheekbone, but she stood still, unflinching. If they wanted her to break, they'd have to try harder. She hadn't started the fight, but she'd finished it. 3 Marines had cornered her after the range. Jake Mitchell had crossed the line, grabbed her arm, hissed something disgusting in her ear, and when she shoved him off, he swung. Big mistake. She remembered the sound of his breath catching when her knee slammed into his gut, the way Tommy's head snapped sideways from her elbow, the look on Peter's face as she stepped toward him with blood on her chin and fire in her eyes. She could still hear her own voice, calm, controlled. "You want some too?" He backed away. Smart move. But none of that mattered now. Mitchell would heal. She'd be labeled volatile. Hayes dropped her application into the trash can beside his chair. Request denied. The words didn't sting the way she thought. They would. They burned. "Sir," Maria said quietly, "I was defending myself." "That's the problem," he snapped. "You see your own brothers as enemies." The room went quiet, the kind of quiet where truth might slip through if no one was paying attention. Hayes leaned back in his chair. "You'll be reassigned to logistics, convoy ops, important work for someone with your temperament." He didn't even look at her when he said it. He was already dismissing her existence like a bad idea he never should have considered. Outside the office, she passed Master Sergeant Williams. He didn't speak, just gave her a look. One she'd learned to recognize, respect, maybe, or regret. Either way, it didn't change her orders. That night, Maria sat on the edge of her bunk, cleaning her M4 in silence. Her roommate was out celebrating. The rest of her class had earned field assignments. Maria had earned paperwork and a long drive through enemy country. The rifle gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Old assembly, lower receiver, optics, she knew each part like muscle memory, like ritual, like truth. She'd trained too long for this, not just to pass, to matter. She thought of her brother Carlos, gone 2 years now, buried in the red earth of Helmand Province. He told her once that the Corps judged only by merit. No one cares if you're a woman when the bullets fly. She used to believe that. Now, she wasn't so sure. As she reassembled her weapon, a vow took shape in her chest. Not the kind you say aloud. The kind that lives behind the ribs and never leaves. They could deny her role, dismiss her presence, call her names behind her back, but they couldn't touch her discipline. They couldn't erase her aim. They hadn't seen the last of her. Not even close. She had no way of knowing how soon that chance would come, how soon 50 Marines would owe their lives to the woman they told to count bullets instead of fire them. But tonight, in the dark, she whispered the words Carlos had taught her on their last hunting trip in the Rockies. "Certify, Carlos," she murmured. "I won't let you down." The taste of blood was gone from her mouth, but something sharper remained. Conviction, and in 18 months, it would meet a test no one saw coming. What do you do when the road ahead might kill you, and turning back means failing, everyone counting on you? The Syrian desert stretched ahead like a furnace, endless, merciless, blinding gold under a rising sun. Maria sat in the second Humvee of the convoy, the rattling growl of the engine pulsing through her boots. Sweat trickled down the side of her neck, not from heat, from instinct. Something was off. They were 4 vehicles deep, loaded with medical supplies, fresh water, and ammunition. Headed to Forward Operating Base Kalo. 50 Marines had been holding that position for 3 months. Isolated, undersupplied, surrounded, Maria had memorized the logistics manifest. Every item, every route, every potential threat zone. This one had a name. Kill Mile 47. The road ran straight through a stretch of crumbling highway flanked by rocky outcroppings, perfect cover for ambush. She'd raised it during the pre-mission briefing. They ignored her again. Too quiet, she murmured. Say again? Private Martinez asked, tightening his grip on the wheel. She didn't get to answer. Contact front. Corporal Jensen's voice burst through the radio. Then silence. An explosion bloomed ahead like a sunrise from hell. The lead Humvee vanished. Into fire and smoke, shockwaves cracked their windshield. Martinez swerved. The world spun. Then came the gunfire, AK-47s from the cliffs. Dozens of muzzle flashes lighting the shadows. Dirt exploded around their tires. The third vehicle screamed over the radio. Taking fire, pinned down. This wasn't random. It was surgical. They were waiting for us, Maria said, already reaching for her M4. Stay down. Sergeant Rodriguez shouted from the back seat, dragging the medic kit forward. But Maria was already outside. She ran toward the rocks to 30 meters away. Open ground, death zone. Bullets hissed past her ears like angry wasps. Her boots pounded. Sand. Her heart stayed steady. She moved like a shadow breaking the light. The first boulder gave her cover, elevation. She dropped prone, raised her rifle, and scanned the kill zone. First target, behind rubble, laying suppressive fire. One squeeze. Gone. Second. Rotating his magazine, scanning left, she adjusted, fired down. Get back here, Sanis. Rodriguez's voice cracked in her comms. She ignored it. They were surrounded, boxed in. Enemy had the angles, the initiative, the numbers. What they didn't have was her. She slipped left. Low crawl, knife in hand. The third fighter didn't. Hear her coming, one breath, one cut. She was already repositioning before his body hit the sand. From this new perch, she could see everything. The machine gun nest tearing through the convoy. The panic in the Marines' eyes as their cover dwindled. She steadied her breathing. Shot 4, machine gunner, gone. Shot 5, assistant trying to take his place, gone. A pause spread across the battlefield, like someone had hit mute. Maria kept firing. Shot 6, rear flanker. Shot 7, right. Ridge scout. One by one, she erased the threat. Years of quiet weekends at shooting ranges. Nights in barracks reading combat manuals under a red flashlight. Training she gave herself because no one else would. Every missed opportunity, every insult, every logistics girl joke, all of it bled through her barrel. The firefight collapsed in under 10 minutes. When it ended, the silence was surreal. Sand blew across the bodies. The sun had risen fully now. It lit the aftermath in harsh, unforgiving gold. Maria stood slowly, rifle at her side. The surviving Marines looked at her like they didn't know what she was, like maybe they'd imagined it all. Rodriguez stepped forward, boots crunching gravel. He stared at her, then at the dozen enemy fighters she'd taken down alone. Where the hell did you learn to move like that? He asked, almost whispering. She reloaded without looking up. Same place I learned to shoot, on my own time. There was no pride in her voice, only fact. The medics checked the convoy. Supplies were intact. The mission could continue, but everything else had changed. Whispers passed between Marines. Glances that used to carry doubt now carried something else. Not respect, not yet, but the start of it. Maria kept quiet. She wasn't here for applause. This wasn't vindication, not yet. The real test was still ahead. A shot no one else could make. A target no one could reach. And when it came, no one would ask for her help. She'd have to take that shot anyway. Why did her coffee cup fall before the first bullet was ever heard? Maria felt it slip. A tin mug filled with dark, real coffee. a rare luxury at the end of a brutal supply run. It tumbled to the Humvee floor and shattered on impact. Bitter scent mixing with sweat and dust. She didn't even look down, because what she saw through the windshield made her blood turn to stone. Forward operating base Kilo. Their destination wasn't a base anymore. It was a war zone. Marines were dragging wounded behind barriers. Others were flattened against walls, afraid to move. Some didn't even dare breathe, and overhead, echoing through the jagged valley, came the precise, bone-chilling crack of a sniper's rifle. Not random, not hurried, calculated. The kind that made grown men freeze in place. Maria grabbed her binoculars and scanned the compound. Just as she locked eyes on a Marine sprinting between buildings, a shot rang out, and he dropped, screaming, clutching his leg, dragged back by his squad mates. No one even shouted anymore. There was no panic left, only paralysis. Rodriguez swore under his breath. How long has this been going on? The answer came over the radio. LT Morrison's voice sounded distant. Pained. 6 hours. He's pinned us. Northeast complex. 3rd story. We tried mortar. Sent a team overnight. Lost 2 good men. He's too good. Moves between windows. Maria turned her eyes to the northeast ridge, a decayed building cluster. 3 stories of concrete rod. Holes in the walls. Half-collapsed stairwells. A sniper's paradise. Worse, it was higher ground. Every inch of the base was under his scope. Another shot cracked. Maria saw the flash this time, a quick burst. From a shadowed window in the center building, another Marine screamed below. Rodriguez slammed a fist against the dash. Where's air support? Grounded, came Major Patterson's voice. Sandstorm moving in from the west. Nothing flies for 12 hours. Maybe more. So they were on their own. Maria studied the wind, the sun, the distance, 800 meters at least. Uphill, variable gusts. Heat shimmer blurring sight lines. Snipers bleeding us. Patterson said, voice cracking. Not trying to take the base. Just draining it, one Marine at a time. A Marine on the watchtower reached for a water bottle and dropped instantly. Hit in the shoulder. His rifle clattered down. He screamed for his mother. The kind of scream that doesn't leave you, even in sleep. Rodriguez turned to Maria. We're supposed to deliver supplies to that? Maria didn't answer. Her eyes were already locked on the far window, watching for patterns. Every time the sniper fired, he disappeared for half a minute, then returned to the same window. The most commanding field of view, confidence, predictability. A tiny mistake. Maria's pulse slowed. Her fingers itched. Her mind ran calculations silently. Wind speed, elevation, drop rate, barrel temperature, time of flight. No one was speaking. Even the radio had gone still. Then she keyed her mic. Major Patterson, this is Staff Sergeant Santis, convoy detail. I'm a qualified marksman. Static. Then Patterson's voice, tight with disbelief. You want to attempt the shot? Yes, sir. I can make it. The silence that followed wasn't just dead air. It was the weight of 50 Marines waiting to die, and the question hanging in every mind. Could the woman they'd assigned to logistics do what trained infantry couldn't? Finally, Patterson replied, You're authorized to engage. God help us all. Maria didn't move right away. She just sat there, letting the moment press down like sand on the chest. This was it. The moment all the late-night drills rejected. Applications, bruises, insults, all of it had been dragging her toward. She looked at Rodriguez, who met her gaze with something new. Not doubt. Not anymore. You sure about this? He asked softly. If I miss, Maria said. We're no worse off, but if I make it... She didn't finish. She didn't need to. The weight of 50 lives settled onto her shoulders like a second rifle strap. Maria stepped out into the wind, the world narrowing with each footfall toward the tower, toward the shot that could either save everyone or mean nothing at all. How do you steady your hands when 50 lives are hanging on one pull of the trigger? Maria climbed the narrow ladder to the base's tallest observation tower. Her M486 sniper rifle slung across her back like a secret. Each rung creaked under her weight. Each gust of desert wind rattled the metal supports. The tower wasn't built for this. Neither was she, according to most of her superiors. But here she was, at the top. She crouched low behind sandbags and surveyed the valley. FOB kilo. Lay below, still pinned in silence. Marines crouched behind barriers, unmoving. Even hope held its breath now. She scoped the target building. 3 stories of hollow concrete. A war-torn shell, barely standing. The enemy sniper had chosen it perfectly. Height, cover, view. He was a ghost up there, deadly, confident, methodical. But he had a pattern. That was his mistake. Maria had seen it. He always returned to that same 3rd-floor window, the one with the clearest field of fire. He'd fire, vanish for 30 or 40 seconds, then reappear to strike again. It wasn't arrogance. It was repetition born of success, and repetition meant predictability. She adjusted her bipod, checked the level, calibrated for distance. 800 meters. The air was unstable, rippling with heat, tainted with approaching sand. Crosswinds shifted every few seconds, sneaking through the valley like invisible currents. Her rangefinder confirmed the number. 800 meters. Wind at 8 miles per hour, gusting to 12. That would push the bullet right, at least 18 inches. She would have to lead the shot, not just anticipate it, but become part of it. Another shot cracked across the valley. Maria flinched but didn't look away. She knew what it meant. Another Marine down. Another scream rising above the dust like a flare. 12 wounded. She'd counted them. Major Patterson came over the radio again. His voice was gravel, worn thin by hours of helplessness. Santes, do it fast. We're bleeding out. She didn't respond. She slowed her breathing. Focused, in through the nose. 4-count hold. Out through the mouth. Her pulse dropped. Muscles loosened. The rifle became an extension of her will. Below, chaos. Inside, silence. Through her scope, she saw movement. Just a shadow at first. A sliver of motion behind the window. The enemy sniper returned, setting up his next shot. She didn't hesitate. The wind kissed her cheek. She felt it shift, counted the seconds, adjusted her aim to compensate. The figure settled into position. Maria's finger closed on the trigger. A breath, a whisper. The rifle cracked. For a heartbeat, everything froze. The bullet cut through air, wind, heat shimmer, and fate. 800 meters across open desert. A line drawn from injustice to consequence. Then the sniper's body jerked backward and vanished from the window. Silence swallowed the valley. No more shots, no more screams. For a long moment, no one moved. Then came the first cheer, then another. A wave of sound rose from the base disbelief, turning to celebration. Marines emerged from cover like waking from a nightmare. Maria kept her eye on the scope, watching, waiting. Nothing moved in that building. Finally, she spoke into her radio. Calm, steady, factual. Target down. Enemy sniper neutralized. It was done. 50 lives. Spared by a shot most said couldn't be made. From a woman they thought had no place behind a rifle. But the rifle never cared about politics, only precision. She slung it across her back and climbed down, the tower groaning under her boots. Below, Marines moved freely for the first time in hours. Medics ran, not crawled. Wounded men cried not from pain, but from relief. Major Patterson's voice returned, and this time, it cracked for a different reason. That was an incredible shot, Santes. You just saved this base. But that wasn't the moment that undid her. It came hours later, when her radio buzzed again. A voice she hadn't heard in nearly 2 years. Staff Sergeant Santes, said Colonel Hayes. The same man who had thrown her combat application in the trash. I've been reviewing the report from FOB Kilo. When you return to base, we need to discuss a reassignment. He paused. It seems we may have misjudged your capabilities. Maria said nothing. Sometimes silence is its own kind of justice. The wind had shifted again, but this time it was behind her. What does it feel like to prove everyone wrong? Not with words, but with one impossible truth. Maria sat on the edge of the supply truck, her boots dangling above the sand, her rifle across her lap like a quiet monument. Around her, Marines moved like people who'd just survived a storm they'd thought would swallow them whole. The atmosphere at FOB Kilo had transformed. Hours ago, it had been a death trap. 50 lives pinned down, helpless, waiting for one more shot to take another. Friend away, now. It was alive with movement. Medics carried stretchers. Engineers checked fortifications. Someone was brewing coffee again. But the story spreading through the base had already eclipsed the supplies they'd delivered. 800 meters, someone whispered. In a sandstorm. No stabilization. Rig. Just her. Just her. Maria didn't respond to any of it. She cleaned her rifle with slow precision, stripped it down, wiped each part, oiled it, reassembled. Same routine she'd done 100 times, but now it meant something. Rodriguez approached, a solemn look in his eyes. He stopped in front of her, hands on hips, mouth pressed into a line like he didn't quite know what to say. I've been in the Corps 12 years, he said finally. Seen a lot of things, but that shot? That? I don't even have words. Maria glanced up. You don't need them. Rodriguez smiled, just slightly. How does it feel to change everything? She looked past him, toward the hills, toward the building where she'd ended the nightmare. It doesn't feel like change, she said softly. It feels like justice. The radio crackled again. Updates from HQ. Convoys rerouted, reinforcements inbound, and a note from command. Sandus's sniper report had already circulated through the upper ranks. The story wouldn't die quietly. Rodriguez squatted beside her. They're saying you might get pulled into special ops. Maria gave a half smile. They used to say I was too emotional to shoot. Now, emotion had saved 50 men. Sometimes it wasn't about proving yourself. It was about surviving long enough to be undeniable. Later, that evening, she walked the perimeter alone. She passed a group of young Marines playing cards under a camo net. One of them, a private barely out of training, looked up and said, "That's her. That's Santis." She nodded once. No smile, just kept walking. She didn't want glory. She wanted longevity, opportunity, and the one thing she'd never been given before today, trust. That night, Maria didn't write home, didn't journal, didn't celebrate. She disassembled her rifle again, laid each piece across her bunk, and stared at them, not in reverence, in remembrance. Each part had carried 1,000 hours of work. Each scratch, each worn edge, was proof of everything she'd been forced to become just to be seen. She whispered, "Carlos, I hope you saw that." It was the only prayer she still believed in. Not long after, a request came down. Colonel Hayes wanted her reassigned, permanently. Infantry, forward rotation, combat duty clearance expedited. There was no apology in the message, but there didn't need to be. Sometimes change doesn't arrive as an announcement. It arrives as a ripple, a shift. A silencing of doubt so total, it doesn't even have to be addressed. Maria didn't pack her things. Not right away. She just sat there, still in her sweat-stained uniform, listening to the wind against the metal walls and letting it all settle. She didn't feel victorious. She felt seen for the first time, and that was enough. For now. What do you do after the moment that should have defined you, but somehow still isn't enough? 3 days had passed since the shot. 3 days since the silence after the sniper fell. Since 50 Marines crawled out of their fear and into the sunlight again. Maria had expected things to change immediately. Not glory, Not celebration, just a shift, a recognition. But systems don't turn that fast. The whispers still came, the looks. Now they just had a different tone. Less dismissive. More uncertain, like people weren't sure what to make of her. Rodriguez noticed, so did a few others, but no one said anything. The real change came in small things. She wasn't told to stay behind during the tactical briefings anymore. When she offered insight, people listened. And when the next mission roster was updated, her name was on it, not under support. But lead rifle, Overwatch, it was subtle, quiet. But for someone like Maria, it was seismic. They were rolling out to recover a downed drone near a ridgeline known for intermittent insurgent movement. Nothing heavy, standard recon. 2 vehicles, 4 Marines. But this time, no one questioned why she carried a long-range scope. No one asked her to prove she belonged. Halfway there, the lead Humvee hit soft terrain and had to be winched out. As the rest of the unit dismounted to secure the area, Maria moved toward high ground instinctively, scanning the horizon. Old habits, necessary ones. She spotted movement far ridge, just a flicker. Too far for unaided eyes to see clearly. She didn't call it out immediately. Instead, she dropped prone, scoped in, adjusted. For wind, there it was. A scout, crouched in the shadow of a broken wall, radioing coordinates, calling someone. Waiting for confirmation, Maria didn't take the shot. Not yet. She radioed it in. Possible forward spotter. North Ridge, 400 meters. A pause then. We're not in active contact, Santis. Hold position, she understood. But she kept her eyes locked on the target. It was another test, not just of skill, but of restraint. The old Maria might have fired immediately, desperate to prove something. This time, she waited. Tracked, verified. Then another signal came through. Higher command, green lighting. A suppressive sweep, Maria breathed out. Engaging. One shot. Clean. Quiet. Over before anyone in the convoy even looked up. Rodriguez just nodded from the gun turret, eyes meeting hers across the vehicle tops. He knew back at base, nothing was. Sud, no fanfare, just a quiet note in the mission log. Possible ambush prevented. Suspect neutralized before threat materialized. Maria didn't mind the lack of attention, because it wasn't about being seen anymore. It was about staying ready, being undeniable, quietly, consistently, again and again. The next week, she was called into a forward operations tent. Not a reprimand, not another transfer. It was a briefing. And not just any briefing. A potential reassignment to an elite mixed-unit sniper team supporting special reconnaissance in the region. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't shake. She listened, took notes, asked questions. Professional. Steady. Only later, alone, did she sit down in the empty chapel behind the base, where sunlight spilled through a broken window and painted the sandbags gold. She took out her brother's old dog tags, ran her thumb across the ridged letters. Carlos had died before any of this, before her enlistment, before she learned what war really looked like. But he'd always said the Corps would test her soul, not her strength, and now she understood. Because some battles weren't won in firefights, some were won in the silence that follows, when no one is watching and you still do the right thing. What happens when your silence speaks louder than their orders? Maria didn't say anything when the orders came through. She just folded the message once, slid it into her pocket, and returned to the armory. Official transfer. Full combat role. Infantry. Detail. Rotating between Overwatch and direct action teams. She'd been assigned to one of the most dangerous sectors in northern Syria, a jagged region of cave networks, winding trails, and brutal engagements. They were giving her a rifle and a roster. No apologies, no ceremonies, just the thing she'd earned the hard way. She could have told someone, could have laughed, cried, shouted. She did none of it. Instead, she took apart her rifle again. Bolt, barrel, scope, cleaned it in silence, reassembled it, Steady hands, steady breath. Rodriguez leaned in the armory doorway, watching her work. He hadn't spoken much since the sniper engagement, but today, he had something in his hands, a worn patch from his old recon unit. "I had to earn this," he said, laying it on. The table didn't come easy. Had to fail 3 times to qualify. You didn't fail once. She looked up. "You saying you're slow?" She teased. Rodriguez grinned. "I'm saying the course just got smarter. Took him long enough." That night, Maria didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling of her tent, listening to distant gunfire echo off canyon walls. The sandstorm outside, scraping against canvas like fingernails. Everything around her was temporary. Tense. Assignments, even reputations. But what stayed? Precision, integrity, resolve. The next mission was already in motion. A village northeast of their current position had been taken by insurgents. Intel suggested a weapons cache buried beneath the old schoolhouse, and the enemy had begun using civilians as human shields. Special forces were preparing a breach team, and Maria's new unit would provide overwatch and long-range suppression. It was the kind of operation she trained for in secret, dreamed of when she wasn't supposed to. Now it was hers. She was stationed on the outer perimeter, 700 meters from the village's edge, tucked into a crag of rock that offered clean line of sight through a broken minaret window. She waited motionless. Through her scope, she saw the team move. Stacked at the schoolhouse door, gestures sharp, timing exact, then flashbang. Gunfire erupted seconds later, then screams, 1 in English, 2 in Arabic. Chaos. The kind that makes your heart forget how to beat. And then, movement on the rooftop. A figure emerged, not part of the breach team, enemy. Rifle aimed downward toward her teammates. Maria didn't hesitate. The shot cracked. The figure dropped instantly. Weapon tumbling over the edge. She didn't speak. Didn't wait for thanks. She simply chambered the next round. This was her rhythm now. After the team cleared the building, she received a brief come message. 1 word, clear. The next morning, as they returned to the forward base, one of the team's lieutenants walked past her and paused, young, sharp, still catching his breath from the fight. "You're Sanny's, right?" he asked. She nodded. He offered a hand. "I didn't believe it at first," he said. "A logistics NCO making that shot. But now I get it." Maria shook his hand once firm, then walked past him without a word. She didn't need to be understood. She only needed to be trusted. Back in her tent, she sat down with her gear and quietly stitched something onto the inside of her vest. Not a slogan, not a motto, just 2 words Carlos had said to her once, long ago, when she was just a girl learning to hunt in the cold, silent woods of Colorado. Stay ready, because now she finally was, and the world had no idea what she could still become. Why does the end of a journey sometimes feel like the beginning of something far bigger? 3 months after the sniper engagement at FOB Kilo, Maria Santis became the first woman officially assigned to a Marine infantry unit in her division. There was no announcement, no press release. Just her name printed next to a fire team's roster on the ops board, like it had always been there. But for the women watching, it meant everything. She walked into her new barracks quietly. Same boots, same duffel. Different eyes followed her now, not with doubt, but with that quiet nod shared only by those who know what it means to prove something no one believed. Her file had changed. Now it listed confirmed kills, tactical recommendations, citations, and at the bottom in red, a note. Engaged and neutralized enemy sniper under extreme conditions. Saved 50 Marines. Recommendation. Combat leadership potential. Maria didn't feel like a leader. She still woke up before dawn. Still cleaned her rifle the way Carlos taught her. Not for routine, but for reverence. Every component was a memory, every scratch, a step in the long road that had brought her here. Rodriguez sent her a message that week. You were always one of us, he wrote. They just needed time to catch up. She smiled. Didn't reply. She wasn't chasing validation anymore. It was strange how quiet the aftermath was. There were no parades. No medals, not yet. But the stories had traveled. Other units began asking if they could borrow the sniper from Kilo. The legend spread faster than the official reports. 800 meters, impossible winds, one shot. It became a measuring stick, a myth, something whispered in boot camp. You hear about Santis? They said she was logistics. Maria just kept showing up, training, leading, listening, and every time she stepped behind the scope, the silence would return. The world would narrow, and in that silence, she was always enough. One night, during a lull between missions, she returned to the empty firing range, alone. Moonlight silvered the sand. The paper targets fluttered in the breeze like ghostly silhouettes. She lay prone, scoped in, no commands, no war. Just breath. She fired once. The bullet hit dead center. Maria lowered her rifle and stared into the dark. She thought of Carlos, of all the times she'd been told no, of Colonel Hayes and the trash can, of those Marines under fire at FOB Kilo, of the fear in their voices, and the silence that followed her shot. That silence still lived inside her. Not emptiness, peace, clarity. She stood slowly, dusted herself off, and walked back across the range as the wind picked up behind her. A new storm on the horizon. In the Costa. Years to come, she would go on to train others, lead missions others turned down, mentor young women who still asked the question she once asked herself every day. Do I belong here? And her answer would never come as a speech. It would come in the way she moved, the way she carried herself, the way she looked down a scope and made the world hold its breath. Because some battles are fought with bullets, others are won in silence, and sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.